Well, good morning. It is Sunday, October the 23rd of 2022. It's been a few weeks since I've made one of these videos. Just a brief word of explanation. A few weeks ago, I had some skin cancer cut out of my chin, and the area ended up being a lot bigger than I thought and than what the doctor thought. And so, as a result, she had to create a flap of skin to twist and move, and so I've got a scar that runs from here down my chin a little ways, and evidently the chin is a notoriously slow area to heal, and so she asked me not to talk a lot, and she asked me not to chew as much, as much as I could, and so I've been not talking very much and eating a lot of soft foods, a lot of soup. Um, but I went back to the doctor last week, and she has turned me loose. Except for I can't play handball or racquetball for another week or so because she doesn't want me to run the risk of getting hit in my face where this scar is with the racquetball or the handball. So I took a few weeks off of teaching and preaching. But again, I'm back, and mouth is still a little crooked, skin is still a little tight, but that will loosen up over time. But even though she has told me I can do basically whatever I want again, except for handball and racquetball, there's still some things in my mind that I know to be true intellectually, but that I don't trust totally, if you will. There's still things that I worry about, and I don't know why I do this. I know this scar is not going to suddenly split open, and I'm going to have to go to the hospital and have it sewn up again. But I'm still very tender with it. I don't scrub my face anymore. I kind of pat the soap on it and rub it around very gently, and I mean, she scrubbed on it when she took the stitches out, and so I know. Again, I know it's not going to split open, but I'm still worried about these things. I don't shave it very hard. Um, Again, I know it's not going to split open, but again, in my mind's eye, I conjure up this image of it, of me nicking it so bad that it splits open. And as I've thought about these things, it reminded me of one of the things that Jesus said in his Sermon on the Mount when he talks about being anxious. And he admonishes his disciples not to be anxious. And he says, don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. Look at the birds of the air. Look at the lilies of the field. That they don't sow, they don't reap, and yet God takes care of them. And so he tells them, don't be anxious about what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear, because God knows you need these things. But he concludes that by saying, therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And if I understand that correctly, what he's telling them is don't create trouble, don't create worry, and don't create anxiety for yourself. And I find myself doing that from time to time in my life. There's a whole lot of things going on, what if this, what if that? What if I say this? What if I say that? And I'm not saying that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I sometimes become so concerned that I get anxious and then I get worried about it, and it just kind of immobilizes me. And Jesus says we ought not to do that. That, but God's in control. We don't need to be inventing things to be worried about. And I've done that. Probably not the only one that does that. But as I think about circumstances in which I've done that, I've been hesitant sometimes to invite a friend over to the house for a Bible study because I'm worried about what they'll think about me. I've been hesitant at times and have simply not done it sometimes to invite a friend to a church service because I'm concerned about what they'll think about me. I've been concerned sometimes about inviting people over for dinner or taking them out for a meal just to get to know them because again I'm worried about what they're going to think about me. And I'm not saying we ought not to be concerned about our reputation. We should, because we are, after all, salt and light. And we need to be concerned, if you will, about upholding the reputation of being a child of God. But we shouldn't be worried about it, and we shouldn't be anxious about it to the extent that we let it immobilize us and keep us from doing those things that we know we ought to do. And again, sometimes we invent scenarios that are never going to happen. I know, again, this car is not going to suddenly open up. And so I don't need to keep that unrealistic fear from keeping me of doing things that I know I ought to do. And there are other things that we invent from time to time that we know are not going to happen. And we worry about them and we fret about them. And as a result, we sometimes don't do things that we know we ought to do. And Jesus says, look, don't invent things to be anxious about. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. We don't need to be making things up to be worried about. God is in control. And in the end, the only thing that's going to matter is what God thinks about us, not what our neighbors think about us, not what our friends at work think about us, not what the folks on the handball court think about us. And so let's go live our lives with the confidence assurance that God is in control and quit inventing things to be worried and anxious about. Well, I pray that you'll have a great week.